can be seated. Well, I'd love to invite you to turn your Bible somewhere, but we don't have a specific passage yet that we're going to look at. You can be looking for the Ten Commandments, though, if you like. Does anybody know where they are? In the Bible, huh?
Exodus 20.
There's two places. Yeah, Exodus and then Deuteronomy, yeah. Or I guess we might look at the beginning of Exodus 20 today. But it's just to make a small point. I've made this point before to a lot of us, but we're going to, it's good to look at it for yourself. 20 and chapter 20, verse 1. But I want to talk about motivation today. In the larger context, we're sort of talking about Christian action and what it is, what God wants us to do. We could read our Bibles by candlelight every day, and is that the work of God? There are men and women that have given their entire lives to being monks and nuns, and they devote themselves fully to God and to His work and to His service and to His prayer. And is that what God wants us to do, or are those the only real Christians? You know, and a lot of times we'll start to think that way. We'll get either or, and we'll just decide we've got to go all out to do that because it's the only way we can be accepted. Or we'll decide that as a Christian, we have to become a pastor. We have to go to seminary. We need to be able to attain these things to prove our commitment and to show God that He's valuable and to try to love Him and to work that stuff out. And so there's all sorts of things that we do. And we have a lot of different motivations for that. And I just have been, I don't know about you, but I'm always wrestling with Christian motivation and what that is and what that looks like and how it ought to work. Because, you know, like on one side of things, God's like, you better do what I tell you, you're going to get in serious trouble. You know what I mean? Like that's negative reinforcement. Like, right? Like that's, if you don't, you're going to get in serious trouble. Or there's this reward side. Like, if you do this, I'm going to really bless you. And that's just like Pavlov's dog. I mean, I know we have that happen, and there's negative and positive reinforcement. Since we're little kids, we've understood this stuff generally. But I want to just dig into it a little bit and see if there's any Christian thoughts there, because there are some. And we're all theologians. That means that every one of us thinks about God and how God interacts and works into our world. And so we're all theologians, and the things and the thoughts that we have about God are going to dictate how God works. In fact, in the parable of the minas, which is in John, you know, the first guy buries his talent, the second doubles it, the third guy doubles it. And when he goes around, the first guy says, I buried it. He says, I knew you were a shrewd man, so I buried it. And it's interesting subtlety there, but he goes, since that's the way you think of me, that's the way I'm going to treat you. In John, the Minas, it says that. He says, since that's the way that you think about me, therefore this is the way I'll treat you. And I wonder if, at least on this side of heaven, your thoughts of God, right or wrong, is going to create that reality, and that's how you're going to experience Him. If you see Him as a shrewd taskmaster, slave driver that's ugly, you're going to be scared of God. And everything that you're going to do is going to be done out of a negative motivation, out of, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to make people mad. I'm going to cower down and do the right thing. I'm going to bury my talent. All right? And if you think of God as this sort of gracious, do anything you want to, God, then you won't mind just doing whatever you want to and ignoring all the other things. So there's some balance of grace and law. There's some balance of positive and negative reinforcement that we need to be thinking about. And then all this stuff, what is the Bible asking of us? Because we're going to find both. So I'm getting ahead of myself a little, but I want to start with the place that we will find. This is sort of the first, this is the Old Testament. So this is going to be a negative reinforcement or sort of like the reason why you do need to do a bunch of stuff is so you don't get in trouble, so you keep stuff away. So it says, and God spoke all these words, and we're just going to read the first verse. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And then he starts into the commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, we like to think of the Old Testament as all law. And that is. It's called the Torah, the law. The first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It's considered the law. All right. The 10 Commandments, they said that all 613 rules that are found in the first 5 books of the Bible are all distilled into those 10 Commandments, okay? and that all of the law and everything is all summed up in these 10 commandments. And what happened in the last 2,000 years is, in the New Testament, there were these Pharisees that were saying, you've got to do the law. And if you don't do the law, you're going to be in trouble. It's negative motivation, right? And it just doesn't work very well because you don't want to get in trouble. It only works for half the people. You don't want to get in trouble, so you do the right thing. It's all based out of fear. And but is it your whole heart? Is it your complete soul, or is it you just paying lip service, right? So the Pharisees would only count a certain number of steps on the Sabbath, and they would wash their cups and do all these weird things, and they wouldn't eat meat that had been sacrificed to idols. And there were all these weird rules back then, and we don't even worry about them now. We think they're silly today, okay? But so there became this pushback of, oh, we can't earn salvation. We can't work for salvation. We can't do anything to get it from Jesus. So there is no work. And grace is gift. That means grace is totally gift, so there is no work. And that is also true. But what happened was we decided we would throw out everything. We decided all God's laws, he doesn't mean that, and there's no real serious consequences if you do. There's no negative consequences for it. God just wants us to do good, and it's all grace. And so here's the thing I want to show you with this the Ten Commandments thing. Grace and law are in the whole Bible. It's not all law in the Old Testament and all grace in the New. It's the same God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So look right here. You got all these commands. You shall, have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself an idol of any kind. Okay. You shall bow. Don't do any of this stuff. Okay. There's all these don'ts and all these things that we're supposed to do. Half of them are about God. Like obeying the Sabbath, not having other gods, don't keep the Lord's name in vain. The other half are about neighbor. You don't kill. You don't lie. You don't covet your neighbor's stuff. So Jesus is right when he says that all the law is summed up in loving your neighbor and loving God. But the very beginning of the Ten Commandments always starts the same way. And it is not, you shall have no other gods before me. That's the first commandment. That's never how it starts. It always starts with this. I am the Lord God who brought you out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of slavery. So he didn't say, if you follow these 10 commands, then I'll be your God, and I'll rescue you out of slavery. He didn't say, if you do this, I'll get you out of jail. He says, I'm your God. I've already rescued you. I already brought you out. You're already loved. You're already good. Now, but you've been in slavery for 400 years, so I got to teach you how to be free. So here's some rules, which makes us think we're a bondage kid, but we're not. He's trying to enlarge our hearts, to trust him. Look, Adrian Rogers says this. This is the best things I've ever heard. Whenever you see a command in the Bible, it's God saying, don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt yourself. Don't have any other gods. If you have other gods, you're going to hurt me and you're going to hurt yourself because they're never going to deliver. You're going to go into battle with some wooden toy in your pocket thinking it's going to deliver. It's not going to deliver. You better pray to the one true God. He's just saying don't hurt yourself. But he is also saying these rules are not about acceptance. All right? This is just about the way to live. And it's not about it. You're already loved. You're already accepted. And so here's the thing. Old Testament, grace, already there. Already there. It's already there. Always had been there. And so here's the thing about God. Our motivations and everything are out of wanting to please him. There are a lot of things that can happen, but it's not about not getting in trouble and all that stuff. And these things tend to get skewed for us. All right, I'm going to keep going a little further. And so with that in mind, I'm giving all my stuff away too quick. I want to kind of finish with what is the Christian motivation. But let's just talk about motivations for a second. If we have kids, we know how that stuff works. We have some dog trainers, so we know how that works here. But what motivation do you prefer, okay? You have two different types. And here's what's going to be crazy is you're going to actually realize that you prefer one or the other. I heard about this financial advisor that was very successful years ago, and he could count, he could analyze all the numbers, he could tell you all the stock market and everything. And it's really not that hard to do. It's basically going down these days. If there's a war, it's going down. Yeah. But anyway, but he could do all the analytics, but he never talked to anybody about the numbers. And this is a stockbroker, Edward Jones, whatever. He never talked to anybody about the numbers. Instead, he would sit down and he would ask people what they thought was fun. And they would be like, what? What do you think's fun? I don't know. And they couldn't answer those questions. And they'd have to sit there and talk about it. Not what do you appreciate or what when you close your eyes, what is your vision of fun in your life? What does that look like? And people had a hard time, but eventually they would get into it and answer those questions. And what he was trying to help them realize is what motivates them. Because at the end of the day, friends, fun stuff motivates, right? In fact, we are looking for motivation in all these places because they're not fun, right? If it's fun, you don't even look for motivation. It's not even required because motivation is fully built in. So fun stuff we don't even think about. We don't even put in this category. It's all the stuff that's no fun, that's hard, that we don't want to do, that we have to try to find motivation for. But this guy seemed to understand something about fun and that being a key factor for motivation. And he ended up realizing this and making sense of this, and psychologists have done this. Of course, we know Pavlov and everybody's done this. But he saw there being a positive and a negative motivation. And here's the way he saw it. And it makes sense with what psychologists say today. If you're a positive motivated person or someone who works, it's called approach motivation. And so you approach something and all you need to be motivated is to see a clear vision and a clear goal and a path to that goal. And if you like the reward at the end of that, you're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. If you want to fit in those jeans or you want to earn that degree or whatever it is, there is a gratification, and you can delay that gratification and do the work and work on it. And that's what Scott Peck actually says is discipline, is to delay gratification. And then you can get there. All right. That will work for someone who works that way. But there are other people that don't work that way. My friend Scott Calhoun, he would say, when's the deadline? And I was like, I don't know, there's not a deadline, Scott. He's like, no. I need a deadline. I'm like, Scott, there is no deadline, man. No. Tell me it's due tomorrow. Tell me it's due on the 1st of next month. But he's like, I need deadlines. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I just need the deadline. I just need the stress. Like, it makes me work better. And he was saying this with a smile on his face. And so there are people that actually need not to run towards a victory, but to run towards safety or to run away from a defeat. And it's subtle, but it makes sense. And we're all one or the other a little bit. But here's the weird thing. You ought to determine which one you are. Because if you're putting the wrong key in a car trying to make it work, it's just not going to work. You're not going to get anywhere. You can have the right car, the right idea, but the wrong key, and it's not going to get you anywhere. And so a lot of times we need to be thinking about what would motivate us best. And I just ask that question to you. What motivates you best? Does a reward motivate you well? Or does fear of punishment motivate you well? And they're both okay. They're both in the scripture even. We have a God that's saying, look, you're going to get punished. You don't want it. I don't want to do it to you. But we also have a God that's like, look, I want to pour out blessings if you just do it. He's using both of them, right? I think that we are all both, that we all have a need for both, but that we tend towards one or the other. And for instance, I tend towards a positive reinforcement, okay? I don't really like stress at the end of the day. Now, stress will motivate me because I hate it so much, so it works too. But I would just rather be positively motivated and just have a goal in mind. There's nothing like not having a goal in mind. If there's no reward, I'm just not for it. I like the candy. I like the dopamine hit. But that's the way that it works for me, and I do better that way. In fact, if some of y'all have kids, you might see this. Motivations will work very differently for your kids. My friends, one of them has some kids, and one of their kids they had to spank him because they just wasn't going to do anything else, and nothing else worked. And the other one, they would take a spanking and laugh at him. So then they had to put him in the corner for 5 minutes, and they would die in the corner for 5 minutes. They hated it so bad. And I'm like, well, this is easy. So that's what you get, right? So our motivations work differently, and we have to find out what works well for us. Now, all this to say, leverage your motivation. Leverage your natural tendencies, all right? But realize that not everything could work the way that you think it does. For instance, if a doctor tells you that if you don't get in shape, you're going to die. I've heard of people doing that. They're going to have a heart attack, right? What if that doesn't hit your motivation? What if you're like me, you need a more positive, motivated, like a more positive reward? Like scared of dying. Man, how many people, I've heard a lot of people say, I'm going to die from something. Like, fine. That didn't work for you. Like, fear of death is not working for you. So what does that person got to do? Well, maybe they're a positive, motivated person, and they need to be thinking about positive goals and setting forth goals that would make it fun, and then it would end up working. I read this book by Jason Acuff, and he talked about, he did this 30-day challenge, and most people failed a 30-day challenge on day number 2. And the reason why they failed on day number 2 is because they failed day number 1, and then on day number 2, they're like, well, I already failed, so I'm just not going to do it. So perfectionism is considered an actual enemy of goal achievement. And so he says you just cut your goals in half, so you only make half the goal. So instead of getting in shape, all you have to do is get up and walk around the block once. You're right, and then you achieved your goal. And just by making it a little bit more attainable and actually kind of fun in a game, kind of like make it a game or something, you'll actually start to thin slice your goal, and then you'll end up achieving it. And so perfection ends up being this huge thing. So we have to lower our expectation. But a bigger thing than that is just trying to make it fun somehow. Just try to make it fun. So here's something that I started doing a while back. I realized, all right, the house is a mess, the kitchen's a mess, all the dishes are dirty. I hate dirty dishes, especially the ones that they didn't even rinse them, it's just caked on there good. Somebody else's Mexican food, And then, especially when there's gray water in the dish, it's been sitting there because somebody ran the water 2 days ago. I hate that, man. Just don't run the water. Just don't run the water if you're not going to wash it. So I used to think, if I don't clean this up, my wife's going to come home. She's going to hate me for it. And I was kind of like, so just do what I want. I guess she'll be mad. I don't want to do it. And then I was like, that doesn't work very well. And they just didn't get done another day. So then I started thinking, well, if I put a record on, it'll take me, it's a 20, 25-minute side. I wonder if I could finish these dishes before the record ends. I'm not kidding. So now I love it. I put a record on, turn that joker up, and I try to do the dishes, clean the kitchen inside of 20 minutes. And you know what? I think I do it every time. This massive issue, all these dirty dishes, and this terrible kitchen, and this big issue between me and my wife can be resolved in 20 minutes. It never was that big a deal. But I needed to figure out a way to induce that motivation, to create that out of my. And so I just made a little game. Scott Peck says this. He says that most of the time what we lack is discipline. We don't have any discipline. Discipline means to learn, by the way. It doesn't mean to beat your kids, okay? It means to learn. Disciples, learners, discipline, learn. All right, we need discipline. Well, most of the time, all that it takes to get some discipline is to delay your gratification. So if you want to have a bowl of ice cream, that's fine. Don't eat it for breakfast. Eat it after dinner that night, after you've done some other things that you want to do. If you want to watch Grey's Anatomy, all the 5 seasons, do it. But clean the house first. And then when you sit down to rest and enjoy yourself, you'll rest better. There's another thing, I talk about it a lot in the early part of the scripture. It's where God rests on the 7th day. And you're like, man, God is all powerful. He does not need any more power. He does not have to recharge. What is the deal? God beheld everything. He saw all that he had made. He felt it was perfect. There was nothing else to add to his word, so he could rest fully because the work was fully done. When we don't really finish our work, we don't really rest. When we put it off because we don't have the motivation and we just want to skip right to the reward, we don't even feel that good about the reward. It's not really a reward, is it? It's just to placate our negative feelings. But when we create a game, when we delay gratification and assign a reward to whatever the task that we need to do, then that reward comes more sweet. And when we've done the work, we sit on that couch and we don't think there's nothing that's going to keep us. There's nothing that's going to, I got to go do this, or I didn't do this. And I said, there's no guilty feelings. There's nothing that keeps us from, so we can fully rest. So delaying gratification is a big deal. Now here is how we're going to stop today, because we're going to end up a little early today. Are these Christian? If you found the right type of motivation, does that make it Christian? If Forget washing the dishes or getting in shape or any of these personal goals. What ought to motivate you to help a guy on the side of the road? What ought to motivate you to spend your time and money to help somebody that can't help themselves? What would motivate you to do that? And I believe that a lot of the times we're using the types of motivations I'm talking about, which is all pop psychology, by the way. I hadn't even used a Bible verse, right? Except, it's just us talking about how to live every day and how to get out of our weird little cycles. Jesus can be in or out of this conversation. It really doesn't matter. But what is the Jesus way? And what's God calling us to? Is it just reward or punishment? Hey, if you see a guy on the side of the road and you're thinking about using all of your faith, what's going to motivate you to do that? Don't want to get in trouble, God. Don't want to lose your blessing. Those are all selfish things. Ultimately, these motivations are usually selfish. What's in it for me? If I help this guy, God, are you going to reward me? Well, if you do that, then you're doing it for the reward. If you're saying, God, I'm going to help this guy because I don't want to go to hell and I don't want to get in trouble, I don't want you on my back, so let me do this good work to get you off my back. Well, then what are you doing? What are you doing? The motivator in the New Testament is always, always love. And love is never self-directed. It's implied, love your neighbor as yourself. It's implied that you love yourself. But the whole thing is about figuring out how to get out of yourself. It's about figuring out how to quit worrying about yourself. Quit being in this box where you can't think about anything else except for yourself. And maybe the whole thing is, the trick is that once we get out of ourselves and start to be motivated towards God and others, that everything that we've been after starts to fill in. We start to realize that we are made for others and not for self. And that all love is other-directed. And so I think that this is how we ought to think about motivation. Not that we can't think about it all the rest of the ways, but apply this to relationships. Apply the ideas of motivation to your relationships. It doesn't work any other way. I don't love my kids because, you know what I mean? Like, I don't use the same type of motivations for why I do the things I do for my kids. I mean, one of my daughters got diabetes. I'm not just like, well, if we do all this stuff right, we're going to get rewards out of it or punishment. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even the same thing. Every bit of work we do dealing with our diabetic stuff is out of love. It's out of her well-being. It's everything to do with her well-being, her life. I don't even care. It doesn't even matter to me. I don't even think about the motivational factors because it supersedes it entirely. And I can't help believing that God knows how we're designed. He knows that there's positive and negative reinforcements. He knows that we have to find our motivations. He knows that we're all different, that all different things make us tick. But when it comes to mature Christian living, he knows that ultimately the motivations that we need to energize those kinds of works are the same type of motivations that Jesus had. And what kind of motivation did Jesus have? I don't do anything on my own. I don't say anything on my own. Only what the Father's doing. Only what I hear the Father saying, that's the only thing I speak. Only what I see the Father doing, I join in that work. They said, hey, Jesus, how'd you eat? He said, my food, I've got food you don't know about. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Jesus was feeding on the will of God. And he says, hey, I'm the bread of life. If you feed on me, you'll live because of me. And so I think what that means is, what do? What would Jesus do? Well, if you're a woman, middle-aged woman with kids, how can you relate to Jesus? Jesus didn't have kids and he wasn't a female. No, you have to say, what would Jesus do if he were you? How would Jesus do it if he were you and living in? So if Jesus was a middle-aged woman with kids, how would he live? And then you have a path to how you can live. And if you think about Jesus' motivation, what was motivating him? It was never, well, I'm going to get rewarded big time by daddy when I get there. Get a big old crown then. Right? Like, he's not saying that. He's not saying, oh man, woe is me if I don't do it because I'm going to go to hell and be in my trouble. No, he's saying, for their sake, I sanctify myself. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I love you so much, I want to lay down my life for the sake of the world. I love my Father so much that we're one. And whatever he does, the Son does in like manner. And there's a unity and a oneness there. And so all this earthly stuff, all these earthly motivations, all these rewards and punishments, all that stuff starts to slip away when we have that one singular unified vision. So that, I think, is maybe how we need to be thinking about being motivated. Now, here's a question. This is a question I'll leave before. What I'm saying is, in a way, the Christian things that we need to do, we need to find motivation beyond self-serving things, right? But how? How do you find motivation if you don't have motivation? How do you make yourself hungry if you're not hungry? Or thirsty if you're not thirsty? How do you believe if you don't believe? How do you have faith? If I lack faith, how do I get more faith? You know? It's hard. It's weird. In fact, how do you command to love? Because Jesus says, a new command I give you to love one another. As I love you, you must also have love one another. A new command? Well, how do you command love? I mean, I can do a lot of things, but I can't make anybody love me, and I can't make myself love you. It's a real strange thing, love. And it's kind of a parable thing, because Jesus is saying, I'm commanding you to love me. And it's impossible. It has to be a choice. And so I'll leave you with that sort of paradox as in trying to find motivation here. Where do we get more? Where does this godly motivation that's beyond self come from? I think it comes from following Christ. And I'll give you a clue. Most of the time, faith is realized in retrospect, okay? So you have to do something first to see if it worked. You can't know how it's going to work. That's knowing, okay? Knowing is knowing. But faith is, I don't know how, but I'm going to act on it. Knowing is, I know exactly how it's going to act out, and now that I know how it's going to act out, I'm going to act on it. Well, everybody does stuff that they know. And it says that without faith, it is impossible to please God. So faith is the active ingredient. So so the clue for you, especially thinking about motivation, whether it's reading your Bible, anything of the things of God, is you have to at least do it. You have to do it and say, why am I doing it? If you want to help a man, help him. Help him. And then look for the motivation. What was the motivation? What was it all about? Was it for you? Was it for him? Or was it for God? I'll bet you most of the time, if you're even doing it at all and you don't want to, if there's any sort of war within you, if there's any sort of choice in the matter, man, if you act on it, I bet you'll see the fingerprints of God behind that thing if you act on it. And you know what that'll do? That'll motivate you again. You see? When you see God in it, then you're motivated again. When you feel God in it, like I don't know about you, but when I feel God in it, I'm motivated further. And so it motivates me, puts gas in my tank for the next action. And when I do that next action, somehow I realize something, and it perpetuates me forward. And so what happens is, as we're doing it, it's like a praxis. We do it, and then we think about it, and we just download what all that means for us. And it gives us energy to go out and do it again. We go out and do it again. We've learned. We've been informed by that. We go out and do it again a different way. And we learn from that, and we go back. And then we go back out and we do it again. And so I would encourage you that a lot of this stuff is going to be realized as you do it. Try, if you don't have motivation to read the Bible, and you don't want to go, you don't know what your motivation is or anything, but you know you should do it, I would say read it. At least read it for a week and be asking God for more. Because here's the thing, in the end, he says if you lack wisdom, you should ask for it, right? Like if blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. If you're not hungry, ask. If you're not thirsty, ask. And see, God, I think, will bring those things forward as we are doing them. And the motivations will change and evolve as we're doing it. All right, I'm going to finish today.